Neera, you were one of the main people weighing in on the New York Times decision on Thursday. Why do you think you've had enough of hearing from Trump voters?
I actually think it's fine to hear from Trump voters. I think the challenge is that we don't hear enough of the resistance. You have a march yesterday which shows over 1 million people gathering after a march a year ago of 4 million people gathering. And I'm all for listening to the views of Trump voters. I just think there is a quality of this reporting which is to the exclusion of other voices. The majority in this country oppose Trump. It seems to me the New York Times or other sources could at least have equal expression for those voices.
Jeff, what do you think?
Well, if you're a regular reader of the New York Times, you have, for the last 2.5 years, gotten more than a full dose of a view that Donald Trump is hellaciously unfit to be president. Just today, if you pick up the Times, there's an editorial basically calling him out in harsh terms, and at least 4 op-ed pieces in varying degrees saying that Trump is utterly unfit to be president. And I thought it was useful for one day for the New York Times to present views of people who say, you know what, we know he has problems, but here's why we're for him. I always thought that one of the terrible mistakes of 2016 from the point of view of the Democrats was to kind of assume, and I think a lot in the press did too, that Trump so violated everything we thought about norms of a candidate that really there was no chance he was going to be elected. And if you're going to be serious about looking at the political terrain, it's important to know that there are people not imbued with nativist or racial grievance issues who see in Donald Trump they're a guy who's delivering for them. I just did a piece yesterday for PBS only talking to conservatives, some of whom have come to terms with Trump and say, you know, he's okay, and some of whom are absolutely unremittingly against him on grounds of character. This is the kind of dialogue that I think we need. And the one last thing, it would be really useful if once, say, Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson would put somebody on Fox News to say, you know, this Russian story has some serious parts to it. And, you know, there are parts about Donald Trump's behavior that really ought to disturb people. I'm waiting for that, and I'm not holding my breath.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Neera?
I guess I'd say I think Jeff talked about 2016, and I think this is really the issue. I think a lot of news outlets did not expect Donald Trump to win, and basically think of going back again and again and again to his supporters.
So what, are they overcompensating?
Yeah, I think there is a level of overcompensation here to say, you know, exactly why do they still support him? And I actually think that this notion that, you know, how could you still support him after this is a kind of a little bit of a bias. Look, he's president of the United States. He has supporters. I think a lot of liberals would like to see coverage of equal or even greater value or time to the people who are in the streets marching against him. I appreciate the New York Times editorial page is doing this, but it also needs other outlets need to do the other voices as well.
Yeah, I thought it was great to see this morning on New Day, anchor Victor Blackwell had a conversation, kind of a diner-style conversation with a group of black female voters, not your typical Trump supporters, shall we say. So that's an example, I think, of hearing from a different group of people, hearing from a wide variety of people. But here's what I think it comes down to, Neera. I see people on Twitter and Facebook say, I don't remember Obama supporters being interviewed in focus groups in 2010 or 2011. It's because he was never as unpopular as Trump is right now. And isn't there an element of liberal intolerance here when people say they can't stand to hear from Trump voters anymore?
I don't think the issue is you can't hear a single. I just like to say I don't think it's that. I think liberal complaint is not that we can't hear from a single person. There's a whole network devoted to the views of Trump and his supporters. It's called Fox News. But I think the issue is, does the mainstream media want to cover both of these voices, the people marching on the streets as well as the people who still support Donald Trump? I think both of those are reasonable. But when you have a variety of outlets that continue to just go to the voices of one side, I think people and liberals are legitimately asking questions about that.
Jeff?
Well, you know, I remember talking years ago to a United States senator who would go home and watch Keith Olbermann when he was on MSNBC beating up Bush. And I said, why do you do that? And I was told it's like sinking into a nice warm bath. And I think on both sides of the divide, people are sinking into nice warm baths to reconfirm what they believe. I mean, if the idea that, you know, when I watch CNN sometimes, you know, I expect the indictment on Donald Trump to be imminent because the focus on Russian collusion and that issue is very strong. And if you turn on MSNBC, you're going to get pretty much a nightly dose of, you know, the prosecutor's case against Donald Trump. And God knows when you turn on Fox News in prime time, you know what you're going to get. I must say, I think the idea of stepping back and saying, how did the most unlikely and, in my view, most unfit person for the presidency ever get elected requires some deep understanding of what's going on. And that's one of the reasons, I think, why you do see people going back and saying to people who flipped from Obama to Trump, well, where are you now? That's a perfectly legitimate journalistic thing to do. And I have to say, you know, I think one of the reasons the Democratic Party is in the state it's in, which is its lowest ebb since the 1920s, is because it had a kind of blind spot. It could not believe that people were going to vote in a way that they could not conceive of voting for.
I gotta say, this is like the debate that goes on over and over and over again. It's impossible for Donald Trump to have won, so he did win, so we have to go back to his voters and support them. And if you don't, you are suffering from the indictment of 2016. If you're a voter, if you're a person who thought he could win, this whole situation is less shocking. No one is saying don't talk to the people who voted for him, sure. But you know, there are a lot of people who
there's a lot of leftists saying, do not interview Trump supporters.
I guess what I would
real.
say, the reasonable position here is, okay, if you're going to interview these people, let's interview the people who went from Donald Trump to voting for Doug Jones. Let's interview the people who don't support Donald Trump, who used to support him. Let's have a big picture of what's happening. The current in American politics today is a strong majority is forming against Donald Trump. So I think the media should cover both of these things and say, hey, why did this happen? But also, what is this new phenomenon happening, which is lots of people are coming into politics to oppose the Trump administration. Those people should have a voice too.
Neera, Jeff, thank you so
and
much
I think it's
for
exactly,
being here.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
I think that's exactly what the journalistic community ought to be doing over the next 8 months, and they are. You want to find out whether or not the people who supported Trump are going to be with him in a year, you know, next November. That's an important story.
Okay,
that's
the New York Times should also just hand over its page to those voices as well.
Hey, let's get to work.
Every day.
And that's the takeaway. Neera, Jeff, thank you so much.